Welcome back, my fellow I don't like to die enjoyers. My name is Ace. This is the Wolfsgar channel, and I will be going into depth about some of the upgrades I've been making to my build of the league video since the last in-depth video that I've made on the subject. If you're just here for the time codes or the links, you can find them as always in the description box below. Otherwise, stick around. There's a lot to cover, so I will show you guys some gameplay first, and then we'll get into the thick of it all regarding gear and whatnot. So we're starting off with a nice, casual Uber Exarch, as you can recognize by the wonderful Minotaur, I believe it is, that is running around. Now, you do notice that I have the massive debuff on me, because sometimes this character goes a little too fast, and the control that you might otherwise have on a slower moving character facilitates the accidental walking over the debuff. Either way, this being Uber, you can see we can tank the balls. We can easily avoid them either by simply walking around or using the phenomenal tactic of standing still. The Minotaur is no problem. The damage itself is a little intense at times, especially with the debuff on you, so you do have to move. Once you get some better gear, you technically should be able to just stand still and tank everything, but unfortunately, I have not quite achieved that level of godhood. But nonetheless, taking an Uber Exarch out is probably one of the easiest things you can do on this build. Unlike Uber Eater right now, this is Uber Eater, which is a little bit more tricky due to the higher physical damage he has, as well as some of the mechanicals revolving around the tentacles. If you want to do Uber Eater, you have to use a decent amount of evasion. Otherwise, those tiny tentacles, or even the big ones, they will smash you, and you will not be able to deal with the incoming damage. You could technically switch to your physical damage shield, the Dawnbreaker, to help facilitate that, but otherwise it's just going to be pain, so you have to be wary of that. This, of course, a Sim 30. A lot of people interested in Sim 30 farming. Now, this is the final wave, and I got some very unfortunate mods. Prior to this, I could simply stand still, as I've proven in a weaker version of the build on Sim 30. But this particular mod list that you will see in a few seconds here was pretty disgusting, because they have the one mod that kind of bricks my build when I'm surrounded by a lot of people, the Flask Charge Stealing mod. As well as you can see, I'm not doing a lot of damage because they have an abysmal amount of chaos resistance. Look at that. It's an incredible amount. It is absolutely vile. But either way, despite all these damage mods and the unfortunate reality of this Sim 30 that I had to face, I did not die, and I didn't really feel like I was in danger. Just it was a little slower than I would normally expect. But either way, even in the most disgusting of circumstances, my build holds up fairly well. Now, of course, one of the main things you will be doing with this build, especially due to its incredible level of speed due to haste, Val haste occasionally, and all the flask effect that buffs our Quicksilver, is mapping. So here's just a little basic mapping of my typical strategy that I'm currently testing, revolving around, of course, the Crimson Temple, with a growing hordes. This is, I believe, a quad gilded? No, quad polish, if I'm not mistaken, with a pretty juicy map roll, and we're just rolling through it. Nothing really affects us. We can stand still in most of the mechanics. I wouldn't recommend getting too comfortable with that, because you always are better off not taking damage than you are taking damage, and you do have the speed to avoid it. So if you do take it, it is kind of your fault. It is a decision you have to make. Everything just dies at this point. We have plenty of damage to make everything butter smooth. I am standing in mechanics. They do not phase me. I believe we even take a bit of an ice bomb at some point, if we not have already. And it doesn't even move my health bar, which is really strong, because those things are typically yeah, there you go. There's the ice bomb. You just stand in the middle, doesn't even face our health bar. And that's it. Like, it's super safe. All right, so now for the interesting thing. We'll go over the entire gear set for those who are new to this video, and for those who are returning from my previous video on this build. You might be able to see the differences and perhaps be inspired to upgrade your version of this build in similar or perhaps different ways. Other than that, let's just start with the obvious. I am level 99. I might go for level 100. I am not sure yet. It is a long way to level 100. But level 99 is incredibly respectable, I think. And we have a lot of benefit to gain from that, because every point on this build is incredibly valuable. So let's start with the passive tree. It looks still very similar. We've only picked up a few more points left and right. But if you are wondering which ones exactly, well, we have picked up the extra jewel slot here in comparison to last video, as well as the mastery here on the reservation wheel. This particular mastery, the 8% increased damage for each of your auras or herald or skills affecting you, is a phenomenal boost. It's like it's 1 or 2 million single target damage that you get from that, which is insane. And of course, I don't have to explain why an additional jewel socket is incredibly good. Now, on top of that, it is pretty much the same build. I've been unable to find my Magebane relic or a Magebane worthy relic, so I can't unspec these 3 nodes, and I'm still using a full flask setup. And since I want to keep my Dying Sun permanently active, I have to keep spec'd into replenishing remedies, which is fine because we also get blind from that, which allows us to get up to 60% evasion, I think, in combination with our Jade Flask and these notables right here, and enemies being blinded following POB against pinnacle bosses, as well as the extra node right here. What you could do, if you find yourself having some trouble optimizing your flask uptime, you could take this mandatory flask effect duration cluster jewel, and you have to go with Spite Concoction, but as opposed to going with Peak Vigor, which is a lot of life, 8% for 1 point is pretty good, you can also go for Fasting, which gives you a decent amount of increased flask charges gained, I think, which would give you a lot of wiggle room to facilitate permanent uptime. It's been quite decent. In fact, if we don't get relics in the future, and you don't want to run the trader, I don't see any other way than to have to use fasting here if you want to do this build again. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. We're still using the wonderful clusters with unspeakable gifts for clearing. If you want to just do purely bossing, Unholy Grace will facilitate, but it will ruin your clear due to having no explosions. Wicked Pal, of course, is the premium. Unwavering Evil is really good. Here we actually went with not Wicked Pal, but the Touch of Cruelty to apply Hinder and get a little bit of increased damage from that, which is not as effective as you would like it to be due to our wonderful Withering. Now, speaking of Withering, we have the Balance of Terror Double Despair, which allows us to become immune to curses as well as inflict withers as long as we hard cast Despair ourselves every 10 seconds, which we do. You know, like we have the hard cast here. It's very good. Our Watcher's Eye hasn't changed. In a perfect world, we would have this Watcher's Eye, but a third Purity of Elements mod. That would be so good. I have seen it around, but do you think that's worth 80 to 100 divines? I don't think so myself. If I could get that farmed up like that, I'd also have a Stasis Prison, which I don't have, so here we are. There are some incredible upgrades that are very, very powerful, but they're not worth the price tag that they currently possess. But the passive tree is here for your eyes. You can find it in the POB as well. But let's go into the gear section because we also upgraded some of our gear pieces. Let's go through the gems real quickly. We still use an Enlightened 4. We don't need any more. You might even get away with an Enlightened 3 regardless as well, so don't worry about that too much. We have a Divergent Malevolence just because of the additional damage. Purity of Elements. We don't need the alt quality. You can run it for a little bit more elemental boosts, but elemental resistance boost, but not necessary. And we have a Divergent Herald of Agony still, which is mandatory to get our poison chance kept out. On our Despair, or on our Want, we have our Hardcast of Despair. Our Vitality at level 3 right now. Just a little bit more regen, but this is just to really trigger our Watcher's Eye, as well as Flame Dash for our movement skill. I thought I had this at 20% quality. There you go. Upgrades, baby. Upgrades. Anomalous Despair on our shield together with Anomalous Temporal Change. The Anomalous Despair would be really powerful. Anomalous Temporal Change is just a little bit more area of effect. It's really not necessary. I just had to have it around. I just had it left over from a previous build, so don't worry about that. And a cast when damage taken support. Make sure it's level 21 if you are trying to run a level 21 gem, lest they won't work together. On the gloves, we have Divine Blessing, increased duration, inspiration, and haste. This allows us to cast haste with all our mana solving, which is very, very good. We also have a vow haste as a result of, well, having the extra button space, but also an extra aura helps get us a little bit more damage through that mastery as well. Really, really nice. We can break 25 million, I believe, with Val Haste active. So that's pretty good single target. Divergent Purifying Flame for the increased damage, as well as the Consecrated Ground giving us regen. It's almost pretty much up all the time. Blazing Salvo for more on-hit healing. If you don't have the Vitality, you don't need this. This is just here because I have the Vitality Watcher's Eye and allows me to get more hits in, and thus more healing. Cast 1 damage taken to trigger all these spells, as well as the Onslaught support, which will allow us to have permanent Onslaught even on bosses. Because if we are mapping, we get it through the boots, as you can see here, the on-kill Onslaught chance. Speaking of our gear, oh wait, before we go to our gear, let's go to our 6th link. It seems relatively important. We have the Anomalous Greater GMP, which is mandatory for the reduced mana cost. Divergent Forbidden Rite, level 21, not mandatory. A level 20 Forbidden Rite, regular is going to be fine. Level 21 Forbidden Rite, regular is going to be fine. This is just the best version because it gives you more AoE or area of effect, which is really, really nice. But a base one is just as good. Don't worry too much about it. We have an Awakened Unbound Ailments. Just a good amount of single target damage from it. We have Anomalous Spell Echo. It is better than an Awakened one due to the increase of cast speed. And triple, I think it's double or triple damage on the Awakened on the last one. Doesn't do anything for us because we're poison based. So Anomalous Spell Echo is the way to go. Awakened Void Manipulation, phenomenal. Just, you know, an additional level, more chaos damage. It's great. And then we also have Awakened Deadly Ailments for just more damage and just cranking up the poison that we do provide. In terms of gear, the big 2 upgrades we have done since last video were the wand. This is an insane wand. I do not recommend doing this. It is insane. I've lost way too many divines trying to hit this because rune daggers were not available when I wanted to craft my final weapon. But it is almost perfect. Look at all those rolls. They are insane. The only one that's not perfect is the bottom one, which of course was also the most difficult mod to hit. Spell damage doesn't do anything for us due to the fact that we are a poison build. So don't worry too much about that. The rest is just incredible. This is by far one of the best weapons you could possibly craft. The only thing that could be better is if that spell damage was a spell skill gem for all spells. Or all skills, basically. But I have no idea how to craft that. Or if this was on a synthesized base with some really, really good effects. However, I've not been able to find a proper, slight deterministic path to victory there either just yet. And the ways that I have found are so incredibly expensive, I'd rather just save up for a stasis prison. So, dealer's choice. Speaking of choices, we went with a Frenzy Charge Implicit right here. I bought this base for, I think, 15, 16 divine, and then crafted in the way that I explained in my crafting video. You can find it on my YouTube channel. An incredible piece of gear. Look at those tier 1 mods. Tier 2 elemental resistance, which is insane to have to naturally hit such a high resistance mod. But if you don't want to craft it on a synthesized mod because it's too expensive, you can also find maybe a cheaper shield with something like max chaos resistance fractured, or perhaps max res fractured. There's a lot of options out there for an even better shield if damage is not your main concern, but survivability is. Because if you are looking for a budget, this shield is way overpriced, and you don't need it. And if you don't have this shield, you can also save a lot of cash on not needing this particular flesh or flame jewel, which is gathering winds. Because without the minimal frenzy charges, Way of the Poacher is typically more damage and a lot cheaper. So you can save a lot of currency there. I think overall right now I've spent on this build 100, somewhere around 150 divines, which is still an incredible ballpark away from what people run around with a stasis prison, because that's like another 50 to 80 divines on top of that, or a micro distillery build, which crafting that or buying that is another 20, 30 divines, depending on how lucky you are and how fortunate your slams are going to be. But this is my build so far. If you want to pull it apart a little bit more, you can check out the POB. Other than that, thank you all so much for joining me on this journey. I might try to figure out how to league start a build like this. I do believe that there is a path to victory for some folk out there. But having that said, there are easier ways to league start. There's always going to be easier ways to league start, to farm up currency and then just roll into the build. So don't hold your breath. But if there's any questions, let them know in the comments below. Otherwise, join the Discord. We have a specific Path of Exile channel, and there's plenty of people paying attention there. So who knows? You might just get lucky. Thank you all so much for watching. You guys have been lovely. I'll see you guys next time. I'm out.